Hello, everybody, and welcome to our session today, The Domino Effect, embracing data, culture, and structure to drive creative effectiveness. Now, in the rapidly evolving world of modern technology, where tech-enabled, data-driven experiences are table stakes, data and creativity have never been more interlinked. But to really drive creative efficacy and deliver industry-leading creative campaigns, it requires a mindset shift, underpinned by three transformational principles: data, tech, and teams. So today we're going to explore the opportunities and the challenges that agencies face and how they can embrace this golden trio of data, tech, and teams to supercharge their creative effectiveness. So I'm Jenni Baker, Assistant Editor at The Drum, and I have a fantastic panel with me today to explore these three principles in more detail. So I'm delighted to introduce Mariam Asmar, Senior Director, Strategic Consulting at Braze; Ben Richards, Chief Experience Officer at VMLY&R; Anastasia Innes, Global Growth Director at WPP; Saiful Ahmed, Director of Ad Technology at Omnicom Media Group; and Ben Essen, Global Chief Strategy Officer at Iris. Hello, everybody. Welcome.
Hello.
Hi. Hello, hello.
Now, we're going to dig into these three principles in more detail. So, kicking off with data, Mariam, set the scene for us.
Thanks for having us. I spent a little bit of time in the ad world, and I think whenever you asked a person if a campaign was successful, everyone had a different answer depending on who you asked, what they were measuring, over what period of time. And I found that kind of really interesting, that it was hard to find some uniformity on an answer around data. And so I'm going to start with Ben Essen over there. I think just from a brand strategy standpoint, what is the tension that you still see today that exists between efficiency, right, like cost per click, and long-term effectiveness?
I think, well, maybe it comes back to what you sort of mentioned in the question, which is, did it work or did it not work, which is often quite a kind of binary question. And I think there's a big amount of any kind of client organization that's looking at data as a what. It's like, is it working? What are the results? Give me next week's report. Have the numbers changed? When I think about most of the data team within our agency, they're focused on data as a why. So what's going on here? Can we understand more? Why is the consumer doing that? Why has that number changed from here to here? And that's very human, the analysis required around that. It's very strategic. And I think often quite siloed from that performance data, which is just like the numbers are going up or they're going down, and we haven't got time to think about why because we're on to the next week's results. And so I think, for me, the big step is closing the gap between those two forms of management of data. And in particular, I think using the strategic insight development around data to develop hypotheses that then when you're looking at those numbers week by week, you're not just saying, did it work or did it not work, but you're saying, of our 4 hypotheses, which ones are true, and which ones should we be more focused on, and which ones should we be less focused on. So you bring that qualitative element into that day-to-day reporting.
Yeah, I'd add to that the clients that can understand the difference between the fast data, which is kind of sales reports or user numbers, but also see how the slower data of how it's affecting their brand are the ones that are really cracking it. And, and they can get themselves in different mind states when they're looking at fast data and slow data, but understand that they are totally symbiotic, right? You've got to have good sales, have good customer experience to lift your brand.
Oh, great.
That's great. And Anastasia, I'd love to hear from your perspective, what are you hearing from clients? Like, what are they asking of their agency partners?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really similar topic that they're potentially struggling with or can see as an opportunity where, internal structures are maybe not completely aligned to that kind of complete synergy between the creative and then the performance. They might have a sales team and a marketing team, and they have different ambitions and different goals, and they're looking to us as agencies to help them, align not only their goals and their ambitions, but also themselves as teams and structures. And I think that's where a lot of the particularly kind of omni-channel integrated agencies that look at the full marketing kind of spectrum are able to then, you know, advise them on how operationally they need to adjust to allow themselves to be able to do that.
Yeah, so I guess to all of you really, and from an agency, how are you aligning yourselves then to deliver on these goals for clients?
At VMLY&R, we're very sort of human-centered, right? So the customer journey is the bit that aggregates sort of data and people, right? And it helps, you know, when we talk, you know, as we're talking about different silos of the business, it doesn't, you know, really helps to align them when you go from a customer-centric point of view and you map it out that way. And obviously you have the data mapping that goes alongside that. For me, by doing that, it actually ends up changing businesses and like being actually sort of transformative for businesses like Boots, where we've done that and they've actually had a look at themselves and how they run, and they've changed the structure of their business to be consumer-centric, but that comes to life through data, right?
Yeah.
I think, I mean, to build on that, and Iris, we talk about participation a lot. So this, and really the principle being that, you know, any bit of data from a customer is a signal that they want to participate in your brand in some way, but often a barrier is standing in their way. And so actually what I think we're trying to do is go, well, what is the intent? What is the signal that's coming out of that data in terms of that intent? And I was talking with our head of data is saying, I like to imagine the data as someone trying to tell me something. You know, it's a need, it's a desire, it's an ambition, it's a hope. And if I can understand what that is, and I can understand, you know, then what might be blocking it, I can unleash that for someone. And I think there's something about that humanizing of the data, which is, you know, so critical to this whole kind of, you know, business of CX.
Yeah. Yeah, and I would build off. I mean, I think sometimes it's just lining up clients and people around, even just language, right? And so aligning that from the beginning, the question is, you know, what's the value, the business value that we want to drive? And then what in-market performance then has to change? And then what, you know, what behavior needs to change? And then how does comms start to facilitate that? Whereas I think today it's, you know, PR sends out a brief and advertising sends out a brief and everyone's kind of trying to measure different metrics that even just bringing them all together can just be very powerful.
Yeah, definitely a smarter use of data and bringing this kind of customer viewpoint in. Now, Mariam, we're going to move on to the next section, which is tech, of course. Do you want to maybe give us a quick lowdown on tech?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked, I mean, tech is really, it's a layer to take action on insights and data. But when tech doesn't work, I think the first casualty is creativity, right? Because it takes too long to do something, it's too complicated, you know, you maybe don't have the right resources to line it up, and it's just simpler to throw something out there and hope that it works than to, you know, try to figure out how to connect the plumbing. And so I guess one of the questions I was having is, you know, what's table stakes today from a tech point of view to make sure that technology is a facilitator of creativity and not hindering it in any way? Who wants to say? I kind of want Saiful to take this. He's like quiet. Yeah, let's start with the ad tech.
I mean, just to add on your point, it's so easy to blame the tech that it's an interesting concept. For me and for us, you know, it's a starting point where, you know, let's control the controllable. So it's about data governance and processes that we can have compliance against. That means that we're controlling the inputs. Therefore, you know, without that, you know, we're making decisions that are based on unreliable data sets, and you know, we're drawing out insights that probably are giving us false positives. So those are things that we're trying to stay away from. That, you know, let's look within. And also, you talked about mindset, right? And it takes us from a I think mindset to a I know mindset as well. And then if we have the ability to validate, you know, some of those creative ideas, then we're in a better place for that as well. And then we can optimize to the nth degree and get great results and draw out much more interesting learnings and be a bit more intelligent for it. So for us, it's all about that starting process that, you know, we look to focus on in the initial phase.
You talked about table stakes there. And for me, there's something around like table stakes is kind of where you are now, because actually the biggest danger is you say, right, this time next year, we'll have a real clear view of our customer, and then we'll start doing really exciting creative things. And I think lots of organisations are stuck in this kind of transformation loop, and there's a sort of fatigue going on where it's like, well, if we just get to the next stage of the maturity curve, then the magic will happen. And actually, the truth is, the magic can happen wherever you are. And actually, one data source can be a source of magic. I was thinking about in the pandemic, the Bloomberg partnered up with Pret and created the Pret Index, which was basically an index, Pret sales data, week by week, pumped into a Bloomberg machine with loads of analysis that says, okay, here's whether or not people are eating out again, going back to the office, here it is by region, etc. So single data point, sales data, plus loads of analysis becomes a bedrock of that. Was a whole content platform for 12 months, just looking at the Pret Index, and I think there's always a truth there. Like, I remember Land Rover Hibernaut campaign where they just said every ad was linked to the number of hours left of daylight before in winter. So it's like that data point is available to anyone at any point, and actually can be a source of creativity. So I think embrace the limitations wherever you are. Say, given what we've got, what can we do to be creative with it?
And Saiful, coming back to you, do you think, are there any consistent kind of pain points from clients when it comes to tech and measurement, and sort of how are you addressing them?
Well, for me and for us again, safety and standards is critical to clients, right? Given the nature of the industry itself, and what we're doing is creating value through digital accountability and compliance. For us, that's important that we have the ability to offer our clients online audits of safety and standards. We're doing that because it creates value for them, but also helps us improve the quality within that industry and that media quality as well. We do this through leveraging new data points that you talked about that are available through our, the industry regulators that exist, whether that's TAG or GARM or PIPCU or the CBA. All of those are interesting to us because it allows us to look at how we can validate inventory sources and also make it relevant back to the client, because then we can create client-led, tech-agnostic, modular list creations as well. That means that we can then do some sort of level of benchmarking to then improve that quality. So these are things that are important to them that we're then taking into our industry to better ourselves collectively. All of that helps with messaging, right? Because if the message is in the wrong place, then there's a likelihood that safety and their standards is brand values, right? And we're trying to uphold that by this digital transformation to the industry.
Can I ask one question on that? How has this changed with the move more to first-party data and clients maybe feeling like it's less reliable from some of those third parties? Do you have an increased pressure these days from clients to make sure the tech does line up and it is talking to each other, so you're not targeting somebody that just purchased something, for example?
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there, right? First-party data is existing customer base. I didn't talk about scale, but clients want scale, right? So how are you going to scale, based on someone's already just bought your product and stuff? So it's an interesting one there. But also, I've got in a few conversations recently, you will know this anyway, that third-party data, it's not that it's going away. Third-party cookies is, right? You can still get your hands on third-party data by, publisher data, logged-in data, an amalgamation of that. So that data will be available. The scarcity, it will vary in scarcity, but for us, there's an education piece, perhaps, right? First-party data, great, seed audience and grow from there, but third-party data, that will still be available at certain points that will help you with that prospecting aspect or scalability.
So just to build on that point, as the industry gets more regulated, but the data and technology is getting more sophisticated, we're able to do a lot more with a lot less data. And I think that's super key. So clients that have first-party data, it's important that they don't overwhelm themselves with, grabbing every data point they can from their clients, their customers, and they just take what is going to be mutually beneficial. And it's up to us. So it's up for WPP, for example, with Choreograph, to only use the data for purpose and to make sure that it's just enough that you can do the job and do it really well and make it really beneficial and add value. And ultimately, that brings us back to the customer experience and how they experience the brand and how they and how they interact. And I think that's really exciting for our industry, is how the technology is getting more sophisticated. So actually, we can do more with less, and that's great for customers too, because then you don't have to give away all your personal information.
Exactly right. The data lakes that are out there will continue to enhance experiences. We have not a challenge, but it's easy making hooks to aggregate first-party data if you're Ford or if you're Boots, right? Yeah. It's tough if you're selling biscuits, right? Why do I have to have a long-term relationship with this brand? So there's this sort of so you're not going to have a massive stockpile of data with certain clients. So you have to look at other sources that you can use to enhance any creative or experience that the customer has.
I think about this, just because when you're doing something like creative effectiveness, you really have to have some of these metrics known and down. And when everything is in so many different places, that's where I think it hinders it from a measurement point of view of saying the creative work worked, but it hinders it too from an activation point of view of making sure you're serving people the right ad, the right time, the right place.
I think that's the trade-off. Going back to the slow versus fast data, it feels like there are organizations that are getting close to singular customer view, but it usually takes a bit of time to get there. Mm-hmm. There's usually a bit of manual entry here and pooling these and then some analysis as well. And so you can get a single customer view, but therefore it's historic, or you can get a fragmented view that's real time. Yeah. And I think a lot of the time it's kind of like choosing when one of those is a better answer than the other. Having a cycle where you can develop some hypotheses based on singular customer view, like, oh my God, we've been hitting that person with 5 emails a week and we didn't even realize. Exactly. And then going, right, well, let's apply that hypothesis in real time and then look at what it looks like if we reduce that down to 2.
Right.
Great. And so what are the key stages then of building the tech foundations for creative effectiveness? I'd love to hear your experiences there. I'll come back to you, Ben.
I think ultimately it's going to come down to singular customer view as a place to be, but I come back to the point that the foundation is where you have, and creative excellence shouldn't be something that you're kind of putting on pause until you get to this point. It has to be something that is ingrained in the process of where you are now, and I think separating out that development of the sort of transformation pipeline from actually what we're going to do with what we've got right now, how we're going to play with it, and what can we pilot, I think is really key. Quite often I'll see a process where it's 12, 14 months in, and it's great, it's evolving, we're putting all the things in place, but actually what do we have to show for it in terms of those big wins? And I think sometimes kind of looking for the little surprising things is the best place to go. I've got a big thing about outliers, and how a lot of data is about the trend line. It's about what are most people doing, and actually a lot of this, you can get into looking at what are the big 3 moments we should be targeting, but actually the creative opportunity might be in the 15th moment on that in terms of size. I mean, for example. We were working with a baby feeding brand and discovered that there was a website traffic spike at 3 a.m., which for any parent isn't an insight at all. But actually for us it was, because it meant there was a real opportunity to kind of reframe how we then did something, kind of played with the website at that stage, and also kind of went, okay, we need to make sure that the content is responsive to time of day, and that we're really thinking about those different need states. B, at 3 in the morning, everything needs to be really simple, and like big and bold, and equally, it needs to be sympathetic to. You probably don't want to be looking at this right now, but so I think there's something around. Again, going to those outliers, looking at those things around the edges, within where you are now, and going where is that space for creativity, and doing that in parallel with an evolution of the tech stack itself.
Can I add one thing there? I was literally just about to talk about tech stack. It's that consistency and standardization, right? Stitching that tech stack together. For us, ad tech, ad server, search, social programmatic, all of these platforms somehow need to be working in tandem, right? If not, then that effect, we don't get reach and frequency right. Reach and frequency means that our effectiveness is poor, right? We're over targeting someone, we're losing them in that user journey. So therefore, it's an element of that for us is, how do we ensure that tech stack is working in tandem, but also being able to work off of KPIs or metrics that are true to this campaign for this particular client. The worst thing clients want is wastage, right? And that's what frequency allows us to do, dialing in the optimum frequency, and then we can talk about messaging on top of that, what's right for the type of message depending on where you are, upper funnel, lower funnel, that type of thing. So yeah, it's for us, that's how we work. That helps.
Yeah, I'd really be curious for your point of view, especially. I think it's really straightforward when you are talking to a Boots and how do you measure and what's table stakes. But when you're talking to a biscuit brand, it's obviously very different.
You never start with a blank canvas on these things, right? There's always a legacy data set, or they're like, we've just bought SAP, we've just bought Salesforce, Adobe, the list goes on. And there's some preset methodology with the sort of the enterprise partners have gone with. I think, for me, it's, if you did start fresh, think about automation, think about that, have that baked in from the beginning, because if you're not thinking about that, you will be in the future, especially for those fast data. You need that to be automated, and going into dashboards, and we can talk about dashboards another time, because give me a dashboard, please.
Whole other combo.
But the best advice I was ever given on this area was start with the end in mind, right? What do you want people to do? And if you start there, it helps to align people and so you're not just trying to nudge them onto the next stage, you're trying to build velocity to have like a task completion. And I think that for me is really keeps you honest. And at the same time, as Ben said, you might find these moments of delight from outlier audiences that you can build against. And I think that's really important. It's good. It's also good for the soul of the business, and trying to bring new things into journeys. But yeah, you have to kind of do that process of what's already there. What's your legacy data? They could be running old VOS boxes and all sorts of stuff from the 1960s that you have to, which aren't going to be always on and fast data. You have to work with what you've got. So you have to have a knowledge of what your client has.
I think one other build on the sort of entry level points. I think there's something really simple around consistency and consistency of measure and consistency of language around it. We worked with a car brand that was measuring in 15 different markets around the world, but they all had their own customer journey. And so very simply, we're going to say, right, here's the customer journey. I don't know if it's right or not, but it's the same. You're all going to use it across 15 markets, and immediately, and you're all going to measure these things. So immediately you can be like, okay, they're doing better here, but we're doing better there. What are you doing there, and what are we doing here? So immediately they can start sharing insights and understanding what's working somewhere and what's working not, just because they're talking the same language and using the same measures. And I think that's true of so many organizations, that if everyone brings in their own journey, their own idea of how it works, and actually what it is doesn't matter as much as the fact that we're all measuring the same thing, I think.
Well, look, I think we could probably talk tech all day, but obviously we're talking about the golden trio here, so we must move on to teams as the final piece of the puzzle. So, Mariam, over to you.
Want to talk about? Yeah, I think we've talked a little about it. Like, tech is the facilitator, but ultimately people are, there's people that are running the campaigns and doing things and coming up with strategies. And, we talked a little bit, I think Anastasia brought it up, about connecting some of those silos and some of the different organizations. It's a priority today. And I think just, creative effectiveness, it's a lot of different circles talking different languages. How are you as agencies being tasked or asked to help them connect the dots a little bit more internally, or break down silos, or any good success stories from doing it? I'd love to just hear a little point of view there.
Yeah, it's been really interesting. Obviously, we're sort of post working at home and back in the office, and we've invested and spent so much time building like a space and a culture that brings people together. Because a lot of it can be formalized. We go, okay, like head of data, head of technology, creative team, work together. But a lot of it can be informal, and that's where sort of I find the magic happens. Now we do training, and we've got our own sort of human-centered design courses, and we put as many of our staff through Forrester accreditation and things like that, which are really good baselines. But the actual magic happens when you have like people sitting next to each other in the office, and they're just like having sort of passing conversations, and that's that kind of identifies these outlier moments and things like that. So, a bit of training, getting the right people who really want to make things is, and just having the sort of the environment so they can do that, and having people like myself and my colleagues supporting people to be able to try new things in this space, I think is really important.
Yeah, I mean, I'd echo all of that. But I think there's something interesting in, Iris, I guess probably about when I started like 10, 15 years ago, when we were starting to go, right, we've got kind of traditional creative people here who make ads, and we've got, some data people over here. Some of them are kind of from a consultancy background, and some are data scientists. And how do you get these people speaking in the same language? It's a massive gap. And I think we're now kind of here now, and we're still a long way to go to actually get, because they're completely different people with very different. One is analytic, one is creative, and I think there's a real job around breaking down. I think we do the opposite of what we should do. We put up more barriers because we talk too much about tech, I think, actually, and we make it sound really difficult, and we create levels of expertise around it where a lot of my creative people are like, well, that's technology, isn't it? I'm like, do you use, I don't know, Instagram? How many likes did you get on your last post? That's data. And I think there's something around kind of bringing it into a creative world and really making it feel fun and silly and simple, and actually kind of doing the opposite of often what we're sort of paid to do, which is make it sound really complicated and really smart. And actually the ultimate thing is when you just talk about like good brands who do it well, and you start talking about, well, when Netflix does this, and everyone's like, okay, yeah, great. And suddenly you see the analyst and the creative and whoever else coming together around the outcome and the vision of what that outcome can look like for the brand. And I think there's something really important around finding the thing that everyone can collaborate around.
Really quick, one interesting kind of case study that I know of from our client base, I was talking with my colleague Gareth earlier, is that we have a transport company that we work with, and anytime there's a canceled flight or train, right, it's a cancellation team, which is, it's not, there's a marketing and a data and a this, they've actually built the team around the problem, and so therefore you have, by nature, just a cross-functional team approaching how to solve that problem for customers, right? It's about being customer-centric, as opposed to, well, that's his silo and this, and I'll do this part and send it to him. And it facilitates just a much faster and I think much more satisfying, gratifying way of working from the user side.
I was just going to say, I think it's interesting that you see that with the client side as well, in terms of the evolution of the roles that we potentially, like we meet in new business pitches, the people that are giving us briefs, the evolution of the CMO. They're such a powerhouse and so influential now within a business. They're not just the pretty pictures people. They're instrumental in growth and the running and the health of the business. You've got now that sometimes you don't have a CMO in a business and it's a chief digital officer, and we're meeting chief technology officers, and they're all really getting more actively involved in marketing communications and creating those customer experiences to be customer centric. I think, for for WPP, we were obviously tremendously fortunate to work with Coca-Cola and the CMO Manolo, who was instrumental in creating OpenX, which is cross-discipline, cross-geography with, our world as we know it changed from, it doesn't really matter where you sit geographically so much anymore. And that's really, disrupted the organizational structure. And I think it's led to more creativity, greater solutions in tech, and the greater requirement for really strong, solid data as well. So, yeah, I think, for us, OpenX will be a good example of hopefully how other clients will go about doing that again, in the future.
If I may. What I hear from clients, the real reason probably they come to an agency like ours, right, is to access scale, to leverage those relationships, experiences that work. That means that there's a lot more onus on us to develop products, and that's what kind of brings those teams together. We're in a world that we need to find a unique differentiator, right? There are things like transparency, compliance, all of those things that means that we can come together and build products that our clients can access, and that's what they truly are looking for, and that's what we try to do at OMG.
Yeah, the CMO's canvas is broadening, right?
Yeah.
It used to be just like paid comms, but we all know you're sort of, Netflix as an example, the experience is the brand, right? Yeah. And it's just these smart CMOs are getting that and say, okay, paid definitely plays a role, conquest, acquisition, all of those things, but then what, right? And you have to maintain that all the way through, because you've got to be good at everything now. You can't just be good at one thing. The days of having a absolutely cracking TVC and then expecting the follow through all the way through to purchase is like, if you haven't got the right sort of everything for how you turn up in retail, how you turn up on your website, how you turn up in social, it all counts. So that's why we're having sort of broader conversations with clients where they go, we want social and experience from VMLY&R, we want production from Hogarth, and so on and so on. So you kind of end up with a sort of a pick and mix of the best parts of the business.
Just to kind of make it feel really difficult. For me, that's the start point, right? And it's like, oh God, what next? And so pricing is something that we do a lot of work with. The pricing team, we're in with the data team things, and that's great. But actually, the thing that I've been looking at a lot over the last couple of years is sustainability and net zero. And when you step back and you go, right, marketer currently has pretty single objective around growth and sales, but we're pretty sure that 10 years from now, they will be KPI'd against the things their organizations are KPI'd on. How circular are you? How many of the people who buy a product from you return it? If they don't return it, why aren't they? What are you doing to overcome that challenge? How are you making people take shorter showers when they've bought the shampoo from you? All these things are things that businesses are starting to report on at an ESG level, and therefore marketeers at some point will become accountable for them. So you've suddenly got this thing around all those data points, and probably CMOs again expending their remit and being responsible for the consumer behavior while using a product. And I think what's really interesting is then, okay, all right, God, we need to bring in the net zero transition team as part of our core CX practice. And so I think when you start kind of going, where do we go next with it? It's scary but exciting.
Cool.
Brilliant. Well, I'm really sorry, guys, but the clock's beating us. And I'd love to talk a bit more about that. But I think just to kind of wrap up and go back to our overall theme of the session, I'd love to get a kind of key takeaway from each of you on, for anyone out there watching or our audience, how can they supercharge their creative effectiveness using the golden trio of data, tech, and teams? What's your key takeaway from today? Saiful, I'll come to you first.
Well, I'd say probably data and tech, we shouldn't get caught up in it or on it. It's not the end goal, it's a means to an end, right? But it offers an incredibly exciting opportunity for us to unlock value for our clients, being more creative, but also creating more dynamic teams, I would say. So that would be my takeaway for everyone.
Great advice. Ben?
think my advice would be to kind of have fun with it. There's such a sort of striving for what success might look like in the future, but actually taking a step back and going, given what we understand about our audience, given the data that we have, what are the 3 hypotheses we can make around something exciting that our consumers can participate in the next 6 months, and let's create them, try them out, and evolve from there.
Brilliant. Anastasia?
Mine would be a goal. Have a goal. It doesn't need to be overly complicated, but then, it's then so easy and you can have fun with it in the creation of the solution. I think that business challenge, that goal, make sure that that's aligned, and then, the creativity will come out of that, for sure.
Perfect. Ben, what's your word of advice?
I think it's not static, right? As Ben just said, we're talking about new sort of data coming in that's going to change businesses in the future. And as we were chatting about earlier, it's like, let data be a inspiration for creativity, not just table stakes. It's something that can unleash new thought. So yeah, use it in a creative way.
Lovely. And Mariam, any final word from you?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think everyone's captured it, but I like the emphasis that we've had on just humanity and people, and tech is very much a facilitator, but at the end of the day, it comes down to people who want to speak the same language, want to be successful, want to work together, and just not forgetting that in this big convo of like tech team, making it very serious. Let's have some fun.
Brilliant. Well, that's some great advice there. Thank you so much, our live audience, to our amazing panelists, and to anyone out there watching. That's been fantastic. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Yeah.